Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 14 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined tonight by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how you doing tonight?
Doing well. Playoff baseball started tonight, so if you see me reacting at all, that's what that is about. But yeah, it's the Eagles. We'll get into it. It's not like last week. Not every loss is the same. So we're not going to come on quite as scorched earth this week against the team. There will be certain negatives that we touch on, I'm sure, pretty heavily, but it won't be quite as negative as that reaction to the Dallas Cowboys loss.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get into it. We will break down all of the week 4 action for you guys. Before we get to that, though, this podcast is going out live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. So drop us a comment. We would love to interact with you guys as we go along in the show. It also goes up tomorrow morning on Apple Podcasts. So please follow, rate, review us there. So, Mark, let's just jump right into it. The Eagles hosted the Chiefs. Andy Reid becomes the first NFL coach to win 100 games for 2 different teams. And ironically, as fate would have it, does it against his former team. Where do you want to start with this one?
I mean, I think you have a title for this episode, and I think I'll let you start it off kind of, because I know you have a rant that you want to get off at the top here.
All right, let's get that out of the way. To all the Eagles fans out there, stop whining about not running the ball. I'm so sick of logging onto Twitter and seeing everybody crying about the Eagles not running the football. It was a storyline after Dallas, a game in which your quarterback struggled. Yes, you should have run the ball more. On Sunday, the Eagles punted the ball 0 times. They put up 30 points, and that's with 3 touchdowns taken off the board because of penalties. Jalen Hurts averaged 8.1 yards per attempt, while Miles Sanders had 1.9 yards per carry. Miles Sanders is not what this offense runs through. He is just a guy. He is just a running back. He's fine. He's not elite. This is not Saquon Barkley that you have to feed the ball to 30 times a game. Kenny Gainwell is playing better than Miles Sanders right now. And so, yeah, you're throwing the ball all over the Chiefs, but why don't we just run the ball 20 more times just to appease a fan base? I'm just so sick of it. Make a criticism that makes sense. There's plenty of criticisms that you can make. Certainly the run-pass ratio was way off against Dallas, but when your quarterback is playing as well as Jalen Hurts was playing on Sunday, I just don't get it. We're just looking for something to whine about, and that's not the thing.
Well, yeah, I just think it was a buildup of after the Dallas week of people hearing about the run-pass ratio and the lack of runs, and that's just what was in their head. And I think it's also something for a casual football fan to say, to feel tough-nosed and to feel smart about football a little bit. I think that's honestly half the battle. The co-host of one of the podcasts I'm on, Everything's Fine, had a man on the street thing that he does after every Eagles game at home, and he interviewed people walking out of the game, and half the people, all are yelling, "Run the damn ball, run the ball." And like you said, if you watched that game and you thought the issue was that we couldn't move the ball and you thought the issue was offense, we didn't watch the same game. Like you said, we did not punt the ball. I mean, that's enough said right there. If you didn't punt the ball, that obviously means you're doing something right. You're getting into good situations for your offense. So there was a lot of problems to talk about, and Jalen Hurts by no means played a perfect game. Miles Sanders did not look good. Devonta Smith stepped out of bounds on what would have been a big touchdown. So there are a ton of things to complain about on the offense still, but they didn't punt the ball. They put up 30 points. Jalen Hurts put up, I don't even know what the number is, but over 400 combined yards. I mean, they moved the ball just fine. And I know that Kansas City's defense isn't very good,
Oh, they're
but
terrible.
yeah, no, I know. They're bad. They're absolutely bad. But that doesn't mean that we have to, run the ball more if we're already throwing the ball successfully. And these, some of the plays that they were throwing to Gainwell are basically runs. I mean, they're screens, they're bubbles. Like that's basically a run. So I know that it doesn't show up in the box score and the stat sheet as one, but I just think people heard the same narrative for a week long and wanted to spout it no matter what the game script was with the Chiefs. So, it'll be interesting to see next week against a team that's gotten a ton of pressure with Carolina, how much they decide to run the ball. If they decide, maybe Gainwell starts out snapping Miles Sanders. I know Miles Sanders still outsnapped him this week, but it did get pretty close. So Gainwell had a lot of juice in that game. I mean, honestly, I'm starting to say he might be RB1 at this point. Like, I'd have to see it for a couple more weeks, but he's been more impressive so far and has definitely injected the offense with a little more juice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's done it as a receiver and on the ground too, but he really fits, that style of running back that Sirianni used in Indianapolis, that, he can flex him out in the slot. He can throw to him out of the backfield. Those are just things that you can't do as well with Sanders. And I think that's why you're seeing more play designs for him. I mean, Sanders is playing more, but when Gainwell's in the game, things are designed for him.
No, that's definitely true. And the gap is starting to narrow. I mean, the Gainwell got more snaps in week 2 than he did in week 1. And I imagine that'll be a trend. He'll continue to get more snaps. And yeah, that's a great point. They are scheming more for Gainwell than they are for Sanders. And I mean, this is the second straight coaching staff that clearly does not view Miles Sanders as a workhorse running back. I mean, I don't know how many, coaches have to say it and have to view it the same way for people to be convinced. I don't know. People were really high on him as a prospect. I was not necessarily as high on him coming out of Penn State, and he hasn't really done much in his 3-year career. Or is this his 4th year or is this his 3rd year right now?
I think this is year number 3.
3, yeah. Year 3.
He's under contract 1 more year.
Yeah. So, I maybe it's just that I'm friends with a lot of Penn State fans, and those people are quick to defend Miles Sanders. So for years I've said he's just a guy, and for years I've said he's nothing special, and he should not preclude us from, adding to that position. And I've been called a hater. I've been said, you're a Miles Sanders hater, you hate Penn State, whatever that is. He was never Saquon Barkley. He was never his predecessor at Penn State. He was never the stud that people were saying he was. And I just never got it. I have never seen a workhorse back in him. He's got his flaws. He obviously has had his big moments. In his rookie year, he showed a ton of promise catching the ball that I didn't see him really having as a prospect coming out of college. And he's completely regressed in that area. Had a ton of drops issues last year, and apparently that continued in training camp this year to the point where he's not being used in those scenarios. That's Gainwell being used in a lot of those scenarios. So it'll be interesting to see what happens for the rest of this year, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Miles Sanders does not look long for Philadelphia.
Yeah. Other spots of the offense, I thought Jalen Hurts looked good. Wasn't a perfect game, but I saw some strides from him that I really liked, particularly, there's one play I tweeted out during the game where he just kind of climbed up into a collapsing pocket. And, I think the ball came out later than it should have, but it was a good step to see him move up there. I'll get some film breakdowns up over his performance once Game Pass decides to cooperate this week, but I need to see it on there first. But, it looked to me like he was a guy that was more comfortable stepping up into the pocket, which is a big difference really just in a week. Kind of strange to see, but hopefully we can see more of that from him, and especially considering that the offensive line had 4 backups in. And even at that, they looked pretty good. I mean, if you were just flipping through channels and landed on the Eagles, you might not have even realized that the Eagles had so many backups in on the line, including, Lane Johnson being ruled out right before the game. And still nobody knows what's going on there. But overall, just the offense performed well. And it was against a terrible defense, but the Cowboys were a bad defense too. And they made our offense look silly. And so it's a good step for me. I liked what I saw out of the offense.
Yeah, I said before the Dallas game that I'd be concerned if Jalen Hurts didn't look good against Dallas, and I followed that up by being concerned after him not looking good against Dallas. So it's good to see another vulnerable defense this week in Kansas City. He took advantage. And like you said, it wasn't perfect. He missed a throw to Ertz early in the game that could have been a touchdown. He missed a throw to Greg Ward after a negated touchdown that I mean, Greg Ward probably should have caught that, but also it probably should have also been a way better throw. So that's those were part of the negatives of his game. But I mean, you can look at the stat line. It tells you most of the story there. He was great in this game, and he moved the ball at will on this defense. There was never a time where we felt helpless as an offense like we did for 80 to 90% of that Dallas game. So this was a huge step for Jalen Hurts this game. And, maybe Nick Sirianni went a little overboard calling it one of the greatest QB performances he's ever seen. But those are the types of things you say about a young quarterback, I guess. And maybe Sirianni, I mean, maybe I'll have to look into the QB performances Sirianni's coached on there. I'm sure there's some Phillip Rivers on there. There's some Andrew Luck on there. So, I can't imagine it's top 5 statistically, but it was a really, really good outing by Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. It was an absolute train wreck. So the defense gives up 6 touchdowns in the first 7 possessions. They also never force a punt. So this is a game with no punts, and not because it was like my Madden games are where I throw 4 interceptions so I never punt. Like, there were lots of points being scored in this game. But, man, the Eagles' run defense is just horrendous. And I figured out why. This is why. Okay? See this blue arrow over here where Alex Singleton's pointing? Oh, my camera just died. I'll fix it in a second. This blue where Alex Singleton is pointing, and then you've got the red, and that's the ball. Okay, this is how bad our defense is. Our linebacker is sprinting to the opposite sideline of where the ball is, and he has no idea where it's at. Okay, that's just terrible. Like, it blew me away when I saw that picture.
I mean, it didn't blow me away when you watch those runs from that week. I mean, Clyde was going 5 yards before there was anyone on the screen coming to converge on him and tackle him half the time. Like, those were the easiest runs I've ever seen. And yeah, there's another picture right there that was going that everyone was tweeting out. I mean, that is just insane. I mean, my
grandma could have gained 5 yards on this play, and she uses a scooter to get around her house. Like,
that's just a cruise control to the end zone there. I mean, that is just crazy.
The linebackers are bad, but we're not getting our money's worth out of our defensive line either. Like Fletcher Cox, I watched a film breakdown from Brandon Thorne, who does Trench Warfare, which great follow if you guys are looking to learn more about the battle in the trenches. I've learned a lot from him, but he just showed he was looking at Trey Smith, who is the 6th round rookie right guard for the Chiefs. And he was just breaking down how well he's playing, but just play after play, it shows him manhandling Fletcher Cox. One-on-one situations, putting Fletcher Cox on the ground. Like, Fletcher Cox is just not it anymore. And I wish people would quit tweeting about it, because I'd really love to flip him to a team that thinks he's still worth the money at the trade deadline. But Fletcher Cox has just really struggled this year.
Yeah, and he's not getting the same amount of doubles at all whatsoever. So that's not the excuse anymore. I mean, we could talk about this.
Sure Marky Mark says Jaylen Smith was released to save the Eagles linebackers. LOL. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
So I'm biased here as a Notre Dame guy. So I love Jaylen Smith, but he has certainly not looked like the Jaylen Smith I fell in love with in college and then early in his NFL career after his comeback from his injury. He doesn't look athletic anymore. He kind of looks washed to me. And it seems like this new Dallas defensive coordinator, for some reason, it always escapes my brain. I think it's Gus Bradley. As soon as he came in there were rumors that he was going to get cut this offseason. And I believe that the reason that it waited was because it was less prohibitive in the contract if you waited. But that's what we saw. I mean, there were rumors about it in the offseason. It's not that shocking. But
I like that he changed his number to Tony Romo's number. Then they cut him after 4 games.
That is funny, actually. I didn't even remember that.
Jaylen Smith was awful last year, and he's been pretty bad this year. Mm-hmm. That said, is he 25 times better than any linebacker on the Eagles roster? Absolutely. Honestly, Mark, you could go put pads on and you could probably be as good as the Eagles linebackers are right now. So yeah. I got no problem with it if he's cheap. I mean, what the heck? Might as well try something out.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I just don't expect, Jaylen Smith from a couple of years ago to come in and be a top 10 linebacker. But yeah,
I hope it's not Orlando Scandrick from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and then he goes on First Take and everything.
So it wasn't all bad on the defensive line though, which is hard to believe as gashed as we got. But Javon Hargrave, he had a nice game. He made some impact plays again. He's still on a tear. He is 1.5 sacks away from his career high for a season right now. 5 sacks through 4 games. His career high in a season is 6.5. He's on pace for 21. So I'm sure he won't keep that up, but it'd be nice if he did. And Josh Sweat had a really nice game. Now he made a couple of bonehead mistakes, an encroachment and jumping off sides. And I mean, you certainly don't negate those, but watching back, I was really looking at him, and he had some nice moves. I'm going to try to do a breakdown on him too when I get some of the tape, but I thought he had a good game. But Mark, the bottom line is Josh Sweat's the only playmaker our defense has under the age of 30. He just is. There's nobody. And it's a testament to half a decade of horrendous drafting, even longer than that. And I see people calling for BGN, and I'm not the person to call. I'm not the person that comes on here calling other people out, but BGN posted an article today asking if Nick Sirianni was a lame duck coach that was going to get fired after 1 year. And I'm just like, what do you expect? First of all, we're asking that question after the offense put up 30 points in a game. But second of all, what did you expect from what is essentially a rookie quarterback who's throwing to a rookie wide receiver with the first rounder from a year ago who did nothing as his top 2 weapons? He's got a head coach who's never called plays before. Did people think that this was going to be a good season? Did people think the Eagles were winning 10, 12, 13 games? We're 4 games into this season. In the same breath that people say Jalen Hurts has only played 8 games, Nick Sirianni has only coached 4 NFL games as a head coach. Why don't you give this guy a break and let's see what he has? I'm so sick of all the overreactions.
Yeah. After week 3, I think it might have been a reasonable article to write. Maybe I don't know, not reasonable, but I think I even brought it up on a podcast that I was on, how maybe it's not out of the realm of possibility after how bad week 3 looked. But like you said, how the offense looked in week 4, that should have prevented that article from coming out. I mean,
who else are you going to get? Let's not forget, there were guys, Eric Bieniemy, Brian DeBall, all these guys that are the hot head coaching names. Not one of them had any interest in interviewing with the Eagles because our front office is a mess and our owner and our GM are a joke. Nobody wants this job. And so, yeah, you got to reach for a guy that hasn't done it before. But who are you getting if you go fire that guy after 1 year? At a certain point, you've got to build some trust here between a front office and players and your coaching staff. And it's going to have to mesh. And you don't do that turning it over again after a year.
I don't necessarily agree on the whole no one will want to come here. There's always going to be people who want to come to the head. I mean, Josh McDaniels wanted to come here. Joe Brady wanted to come here. And at the time, those were guys that I really wanted to come coach here instead of a guy, Nick Sirianni, who no one else in the NFL wanted. So I do think, the whole who's going to come here thing, we would find someone, in my opinion. But I do think they went so off the board here with a hire that maybe he does have a lot less, wiggle room or leash than a normal head coaching hire would. I think this is maybe the type of hire where you fell in love with a guy interviewing him and you fell in love with, his philosophies and whatever that is. And if it looks terrible right away, it might be time to make a decision. But I'm not at that point at all right now. I mean, that's not where I'm not saying that's where I'm at. I'm just saying if this were to go down a dark alley. And I still think this team could win 8 to 9 games. We always knew this early stretch was going to be difficult. And the only game where it looked like this team couldn't be an 8-win team, a 9-win team, was against Dallas, Dallas looked really good. Dallas made Carolina, their whole 3-0 start looked completely fake, and they looked completely phony. Dallas made Tampa's defense look really bad. And I mean, Tampa's defense has had some trouble still, but one has.
A lot of Tampa's struggles now are injury related. They weren't operating with those same injuries when the Cowboys made them look silly. So, yeah. And we're going to get into the Cowboys here in a minute because they're looking really, really good, which listeners of this podcast might not want to hear, but they're looking pretty good. So,
for sure. But it's just, we gave Kansas City a game. I mean, we didn't cover, whatever. Sorry to the gamblers out there, but we gave them a game. We should have beaten San Francisco. We beat the crap out of Atlanta, who's now, obviously, they beat the Giants. They lost a miracle loss to Washington. So that's, I mean, and they kept it close with Atlanta. So every other game that Atlanta has played in besides the Eagles has come down to the wire and has been a game within one score with Atlanta having the ball in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, I don't know what to make of the Eagles right now. That's kind of where I'm going with this point because of how good they looked in week 1, how bad they looked in week 3. They did look pretty good in week 2. And then, it's a mixed bag in week 4. So this week coming up will tell us a lot about this team and a lot about where this season is heading and if this is going to be just, a 6 to 9 win season where there's positive takeaways and things to build on, or is this going to be a 4 or 5 win kind of, not a lot of positives, not a lot of things to build on type of season. And I'm still trending towards that 7, 8, 9 win range. But I mean, the schedule was always difficult to open this first 6 games or the first 7 games. And that's without the Panthers and Raiders starting 3-1, which not a lot of people expected. So, it's really difficult. It's a really, really difficult start to the schedule. It does very much soften up.
Yeah. The last point I want to make on the Eagles, because I saw this earlier as well, then we probably need to move on. But I saw people they were commenting on Jonathan Gannon saying that we're not a dime team when he was asked why the Eagles don't go with 6 defensive backs versus 11 personnel on 3rd and long. He said we go with 4 down and 2 linebackers, and people were making a big deal out of that. First of all, nickel is matching personnel there. But second of all, the Eagles are playing a lot of zone coverage, so it doesn't really matter. You're not asking a linebacker to run with Tyreek Hill. You're asking a linebacker to cover an area in the middle of the field when Tyreek Hill runs through it. And so it really ultimately just comes down to, is your 4th cornerback or your 2nd linebacker the better player? And unfortunately for the Eagles, the answer is none of the above. And so it doesn't really matter. But that doesn't really matter. That comes into the equation if we're playing man. The Eagles are playing a lot of zone coverage, and so that matching personnel really isn't that big of a deal, particularly when you're getting gashed by the run. Keeping that extra linebacker on the field might be helpful.
So, yeah, I just think you can go a ton of directions scheme-wise talking about what went wrong defensively against the Chiefs. But the people that are freaking out about getting gashed by the run, what do you want them to do? Just not even going deep into scheme-wise. Do you want them to sell out for the run against Patrick Mahomes? Because that's not going to work. Because we saw what Tyreek Hill was able to do when he was able to take the top off the defense. I think he had, 190 yards and 3 touchdowns. So there's no winning with Kansas City. They did a good job taking Travis Kelce out of the game. I mean, that's one thing I guess you can point to.
Yeah, my fantasy team, lost because of that, but whatever. Not better.
So, there's going to be things you sacrifice against Kansas City, and that's usually going to be the running game, which is why people were so high on the idea of Clyde Edwards-Helaire for fantasy last year and this year, because if you're throwing the ball like Mahomes does, you're not going to be able to put anybody in the box to stop the run. So that means when Kansas City does run the ball, it should be super efficient. It hasn't always been at times because there's been question marks about Clyde's talent, but Clyde's talent doesn't really matter when we have absolutely no one converging on him, and our linebackers are so slow, and no one's getting to, plug the holes. I mean, those are issues, and that defensive line. The performance against the run was shameful for the amount of money that we're obviously paying Cox and Hargrave and Barnett and whatever. It's shameful, but I'm not freaking out quite as much about the defense just because it's Kansas City and just because you're going to lose some matchups. You're going to lose some areas. Now, we did get the one pick, and obviously you'd like to cause 2 or 3 turnovers when you're going against Kansas City if you can't get them to punt. But, yeah, I think a lot of the people that are let down by our defensive performance against the Chiefs don't watch the Chiefs very often. Not a lot of people put up very good defensive performances against the Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on around the NFL. There was a lot of not as good games this week. I felt like it was the first week. There was a kind of a bunch of just games, but there were still a few really good ones. So I guess we can touch briefly on Thursday night's game, Jacksonville at Cincinnati. Battle of the last 2 number 1 draft picks. Cincinnati digs a big hole early, but they're able to come out on top, and they move to 3-1. On the Jaguars side, Trevor Lawrence plays his first turnover-free game of his NFL career, while the backup running back, Robinson, runs for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just kind of once again proving that spending a first-round pick on Travis Etienne was just such a bad move. But really, I think the biggest thing to talk about here is Urban Meyer. This guy's not going to make it to Halloween. Like, he won't make it. You got reports coming out now that, people are saying that, players are saying that he's lost the locker room. Nobody respects him. Like, you want to talk about firing Sirianni, you do it when this stuff starts happening. And Urban Meyer is not long for Jacksonville.
What an absolute mess. I mean, we won't get too far into it, but what an embarrassment to Urban Meyer. I mean, oh my God, the pictures and the videos, you guys have all seen him. I'm sure if you're watching this, you're probably online and on Twitter. So just so funny. His wife was liking pictures on Twitter that night and she was tweeting out recipes, and someone said the feeling when your wife makes this for dinner, and it was Urban all liquored up at the bar. And she liked it. I don't know if there was any awareness in liking that post, but just so funny. Like, I mean, Urban Meyer is so used to being the president of the highest paid public official in town, basically the president of the town, above the mayor, ranking above the governor in Columbus and down in Gainesville in Florida. And it's not the same way when you're the head coach of the 0-4 Jaguars. That stuff's going to leak and get out.
I'm feeling great about my under 6.5 win total bet on the Jags right now.
Yeah, that was a terrible, terrible bet by me. Terrible.
All right, let's throw it to Washington at Atlanta. Mark, this Washington defense is just bad. This is the same Atlanta that the Eagles' bad defense, just locked down after those first 2 drives. Washington gives up 30 to Atlanta. Washington also misses 2 extra points in this game, which I don't know, man. Crazy game. Your boy Heineke looked good, though, and you're tagging me on Twitter. But, Mark, I'm the one that said on the preview show, Heineke looks good when he's not under pressure. The Atlanta defense can't get pressure. So, I thought Heineke could maybe have a get-right sort of game. I'm interested to kind of see if he can build off of that next week.
But it's not about the stat line. It's not about the performance. It's about the insane plays this guy seems to make at the end of games. And there's 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Is Heineke in the top 10 of guys you want leading that drive? I'm joking, but it's crazy. This is like the 3rd straight week or 3 out of 4 weeks where he's making plays at the end of games. And those throws he's making are straight out of Madden. That's coming across your body, running around in the pocket, doing some Bo Nix stuff from Auburn on Saturday night, and just absolutely crazy. And that even McKissick made an incredible jump for the pylon there. I don't know if I've ever seen someone jump from that far out and not get hit out of bounds before scoring. Just a crazy ending to that game. What a game this was. I had the over, cashed it 15 or 12 minutes left in the third quarter. So if you're out there listening, go hammer the Washington football team over for this week against New Orleans. I think it's at 43.5. I'm taking it every week. The Vegas does not seem to be adjusting to Washington football team's defense being terrible. I think they're like 25th in DVOA, which is actually a testament to how good they are at stopping the run still, because they are terrible at stopping the pass. I believe they're bottom 3, if not bottom 1. I'd have to look at the updated rankings there. But this Washington defense is a serious problem. The D-backs are the worst in football, it seems. I think they actually lost one of their corners for the year in this game too. So it looks like it's only going to get worse there in the secondary for Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go on to – this is the worst game of the week. You had Houston traveling to Buffalo, and the Bills just blow out the Texans like we knew they would. This game's really not even worth talking about. The only thing I'll mention is for the Bills, their first 4 trips into the red zone ended without touchdowns, and so that could be a little concerning if you're playing a team better than the Texans, but they weren't. So, they drop 40 on them and move on.
Yeah, they are going to Kansas City next week. I would imagine that you have to start scoring those touchdowns against Kansas City, as we saw this week with all the field goals we took. So I think Kansas City wins that game. I still think Kansas City is a better team than Buffalo, but Buffalo is showing against these bad teams what they should, which is just you blow them out and you take care of business and you move on. And Josh Allen's deep accuracy, the concerns from the early season do seem to kind of be going away. It seems like they've been able to make plays down the field. I don't know if that's because they've been able to run the ball more consistently, but the offense has been more overall well-rounded in general these last couple of weeks.
Yeah. So moving on to another one, we've got the Detroit Lions at the Chicago Bears. Some crazy drama unfolding around this one. So Matt Nagy apparently gives up play calling, but doesn't tell anybody about it. And then the Bears go out and win, which is shocking when Matt Nagy is not calling the play. And I mean, watching the game, you could tell he's not doing it. So in the press conference after the game, he's being asked about it. And he tried to be real cagey about it and not say he wasn't calling the plays anymore. And finally he admitted that he wasn't calling the plays. And I'm going to be honest, he sounded upset that they won. He wanted this to fail, and he wanted Andy Dalton to come back so he can start calling his plays for the Andy Dalton offense. I just don't get it. It might be a race to see who gets fired first, Matt Nagy or Urban Meyer. I don't know, but
isn't it crazy that they're 2-2? Bears being 2-2, just it feels crazy.
Yeah, I have no word. Their head coach is actively sabotaging them, and they're 2-2. I don't get it. But Detroit, they made it to the red zone their first 3 possessions, and they scored 0 points. They had a couple of fumbles in there, but that's hard to come back from no matter who you're playing. But the Bears got a pretty good defense, and so the Bears end up winning this one despite Matt Nagy's best efforts.
Yeah, I just can't believe they're 2-2, and Matt Nagy's won 12 8-8 games in his 3 years there, and it's always crazy to me that they haven't been worse. I guess it just speaks to how much talent is on that defense week in and week out for them to have the chance they have to win. But Nagy seems like the worst communicator of all time. He just seems like the worst interpersonal human being of all time. It's crazy. Just stop talking to the media. You should get it taken out of his contract somehow.
He needs to just take a leaf out of Marshawn Lynch's book and just say, "I'm just here so I don't get fined."
Yeah, I wonder what would happen if a coach just did that to every question all week long. Oh my god,
it'd probably catch on and they'd all start doing it. They all hate talking to the media. But
I guess Belichick basically, we're on to Cincinnati. On to Cincinnati.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into this one. Carolina at Dallas. Dallas's offense is just on fire. Elliott rushes for over 100 yards. Dak throws 4 touchdowns. On defense, Trevon Diggs has 2 more interceptions. That gives him 5 in 4 games. My question to you, Mark, is are the Cowboys for real? We talked about they're going to win this division because it's a bad division, but they're winning, and they're winning impressively right now without Gallup, without Lawrence, without Collins, without Keanu Neal. Like, those guys are all coming back. And so is this team for real? Are they actually going to make a playoff push?
They're definitely for real. I don't know if they're a Super Bowl contender level of for real. I still wouldn't put them at that level quite yet. But if Trevon Diggs is as good as he looks, and if Micah Parsons is as good as he looks, I mean, that gives them two bookends. I mean, really young bookends on that defense. And it's going to be interesting to see if that defense holds up throughout the year, because there are so many holes on it still and so many places that don't look strong on paper. But they've been pretty good. And I know they gave up 28 points in this game, but this was not a 36-28 game. This was, I believe it was 33-14 or 36-14 at one point. So Dallas controlled this game from the early onset. Like, this was all Cowboys all game.
Darnold looked good early in the game, but Dallas kind of opened it up. They started blitzing in the second half, and it was just a whole different story. Like, he just fell apart.
Yeah, I mean, he's Sam Lamarnold. He's leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns right now. Sam Darnold. I stole that from someone, but it's pretty crazy. The play that they called there, I don't know if that's just Joe Brady being a genius. It was like straight out of Madden or straight out of NCAA football, kind of. It was basically a speed option, but they faked the pitch, and then Darnold just cut it in, and they all went with the pitch. So that was a pretty creative play call. Joe Brady just absolutely dialing it up there in Carolina, making Sam Darnold look way better than he is, in my opinion. But, Carolina's got a good roster. Carolina's got a lot of pieces to be excited about. Carolina's got a head coach to be excited about. And I think they have the best play caller that's not the best offensive coordinator in football in Joe Brady. I think he's way overqualified at this point to be an offensive coordinator. But you're only going to go so far with Sam Darnold, and I still feel that way, and I know he looked good. But in the middle parts of this game, Carolina just couldn't get anything going. Now, is that Darnold? Is that missing Christian McCaffrey, which is a huge loss, obviously? But, who's to say? I kind of would probably say it's a little bit of both. I just, I feel pretty good about the Eagles going into next week against Carolina, which we'll talk about on Thursday or Friday. But, that's just, I think every fan base is going to feel that way playing against Carolina. No one is going to be afraid to play the Carolina Panthers this year and afraid to play Sam Darnold, no matter how many games they win or whatever it is, because of Sam Darnold and because their offense is never going to be unstoppable, in my opinion, with that guy at quarterback. So maybe I'm letting my bias in a little bit too far here, but I just was not one to freak out about the 3-0 start for Carolina. I think it would have been the same start with Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, as we saw with him starting 3-0 in Denver.
Yeah. Okay, so the draft pick bowl, we had Indianapolis at Miami, and Indianapolis wins the game, which was the outcome that Eagles fans should have hoped for. And they did it behind a strong rushing performance and a lot of underneath throws from Wentz. And really behind a suffocating defense. So the Colts entered the week allowing the sixth most yards per play on defense, 6.29 yards per play. They held the Dolphins to 3 yards per play. Miami wasn't over 100 yards until the fourth quarter. The offense just did not show up. I'm going to go ahead and retract my Jacoby Brissett might run the offense better than Tua thought. Jacoby Brissett, not a good day. Not a good day for that offense. But Indianapolis rolls, picks up their first win, which is obviously huge for Eagles fans. And, by the same token, Tennessee loses, which is also huge. Keeps that division. It lets them close a game in that division and stay in a playoff hunt here. So all positive outcomes for the Eagles.
Yeah, I had Colts money line, so I was paying attention to this game closely, and Brissett was not good. Miami's offense just could not get anything going. They didn't even give Myles Gaskin, their best running back, a chance, in my opinion. He got like 3 carries. They were giving the ball to Malcolm Brown and other bums out of the backfield. Brian Flores makes some weird decisions. It seems like he puts people in the doghouse pretty fast. So that was something I was paying attention to. But, I mean, Carson Wentz did not look great in this game. They dinked and dunked their way to a win. This was just – Miami lost this game more than Indy won it. And like you said, this is exactly what we needed as Eagles fans with the pick bowl.
Yeah, absolutely. Marky Mark chiming in on YouTube says PFF rated Steven Nelson one of the best man-to-man corners, and Slay is a good man-to-man corner. Why are we playing the highest zone in the league? Eagles blitz 14 times so far this year, which is the lowest in the league. Need to blitz and pressure QBs to create turnovers instead of sitting in cover 2 zone and letting teams run and pass down the field. I think the biggest issue is, you've played Kyle Pitts, you've played Travis Kelce, like you've played these dynamic tight ends, and the Eagles just don't have a safety or a linebacker that can cover those tight ends in man coverage. I think that's the biggest issue. I wouldn't be surprised if you see more man coverage when we're not against such dynamic tight end threats. And it kind of comes to the same thing too for blitzing. Like, you got to be able to cover behind that. And maybe if you just can't cover at all, you should just throw the kitchen sink at them anyways. But I do think that's why you've seen so much zone coverage, is because there's just nobody that can cover those tight ends otherwise. And coincidentally, we've done pretty well on the tight ends, Dalton Schultz aside. I still don't know what that was about. So
yeah, we have done really well on tight ends, actually, with Pitts, Kittle, and Kelce, which are 3 of the tougher ones in the league to stop. They've all had, I believe, their worst game of the year against us. So, yeah, it's definitely, there's going to be positives and negatives to every defensive scheme, and it's just us. It's on us to pick which one we're kind of willing to live with that week. That's kind of the way I look at being a multiple defense and not having a rigid scheme in a way that Schwartz did. You kind of just have to make decisions on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and I do expect them to start playing, doing some more match man coverage here now that we're kind of through that murderer's row of tight ends.
For sure. I think that could be spot on.
Okay, Cleveland at Minnesota. We previewed this game saying that the Browns defense has been playing really good. Minnesota had a red hot offense. We saw who won this one. The Browns hold the Vikings to 7 points. Honestly, the Browns defense might be one of the best in the league right now. They gave up an opening drive touchdown to the Vikings, and they allowed 180 yards the rest of the day. And so the Browns defense, and Baker Mayfield was awful in this game. He was terrible. He even said after the game, I don't even know what happened. But the Browns rushed for 184 yards. They played smothering defense, and they get out with a win that's closer than it should have been. But man, this Browns defense is for real.
The craziest part about it is the Vikings went on an 85-yard, 7-minute drive to start off the game. This is 7-0 right away from Minnesota. They don't score for the rest of the game. Cleveland, they adjusted to whatever Minnesota was doing on that first drive and absolutely shut down what they wanted to do in that game. So that was really impressive. And this is the type of win that, it makes you feel both ways. This is a team that I picked to go to the Super Bowl in Cleveland. So it makes me feel one of two ways about that pick. Like you said, Baker was terrible. This is one of those games where you watch Baker and you're like, this is the guy who is supposed to be on a Super Bowl contender. This is the guy who went first overall in an NFL draft, mechanically speaking. And he makes some decisions that are just, he is kind of a scary person to rely on with a roster that good in Cleveland, I'd say. But then you also look at it the other way. He played his worst possible game. They weren't able to run, the crap out of the ball in the same way that they usually are. And they still escape with a win because of how good that defense is and because of how talented that defense is. And that says a lot to win those games that maybe you're not supposed to win. Maybe you don't play well enough to win, at least offensively. I think it says a lot to still come away with wins like that. You're on mute.
Proven they can get it done on either side of the ball. So I'm glad you said that. I was teaching a math class today and on Zoom, and I muted my mic while I was playing a 2-minute video, so my mic wouldn't pick up the video audio and echo it. And then I forgot to unmute it, and I worked out a whole problem on the screen before a kid goes, "You're muted." But that's why you're the best co-host in the game. So I'm going to get you to start coming to my pre-algebra Zoom classes. So rolling along here, the New York Football Giants. I don't know why I said that. I hate when people say that. At the New Orleans Saints. Daniel Jones has 402 passing yards as the Giants top the Saints in overtime. Kadarius Toney finally gets involved on this offense. The first round pick that the Giants took, he had 6 catches for 78 yards. But Saints, I don't understand how you blow an 11-point lead in the last 8 minutes to the Giants. I just don't get it.
Yeah, the Saints did not look good in this game. Like, this is a game I watched a lot of, and my main takeaway is bet against the Saints next week. And I looked at the schedule, and they're traveling to Washington to play my man Taylor Heineke. So I'm going to be all over Washington next week. I was really, really taken aback with how just terrible this Saints offense was, and the play calling and the decisions Sean Payton was making on when to kick a field goal, when to go for it, all these just really, really weird decisions that Sean Payton made. Seems like he was really nervous to trust either Taysom or Jameis. We saw a lot of Taysom in this game. I'm not a big Taysom Hill guy. He had a touchdown run in this game. That was one of the more unbelievable touchdown runs you'll see on an NFL football field. He felt like he broke like 5 tackles to get there. But without that and without the 2 touchdown runs he had, I mean, that Saints offense would have been lifeless. I mean, they couldn't get anything going. And this goes back to the same problem that I kind of brought up in the preseason, and the same thing I've kind of been concerned about with the Saints all year long. They just don't have playmakers on the outside without Michael Thomas. I mean, they have nothing to be excited about or to be afraid of defensively at the wide receiver position. So people can complain about Jameis all they want. At one point in this game, he completed 12 straight passes, and they just went away from him. They started bringing Taysom in. They started trying to run the ball, and then he couldn't get that back in rhythm again, really. This was a weird game. I don't know what New Orleans was doing. They did a horrible job maintaining a lead, like you mentioned, an 11-point lead with how much time left?
It's like 8 minutes.
Yeah, they were acting like it was like a tie game. Like, if you watched it, they were not taking their time. They were throwing the ball still. Like, after earlier in the game, it felt like they were running the ball too. I'm a big Sean Payton guy. I think he's a genius. Really, really weird gameplay. I mean, we'll get to another genius that I think made some really weird decisions on Sunday night. But not a great day for in my opinion, the 3 best coaches in football. And I'll kind of highlight that as we go throughout. But Sean Payton, just weird day, in my opinion. I said all of that to avoid saying that Daniel Jones was really good in this game, and I don't want to talk about it. So I'm just going to keep humming past that.
Let's be honest. The good moments of Daniel Jones have always been good. It's the bad moments that have just plagued his career. Like, if he could stop fumbling the ball and throwing picks, he could be a good quarterback. And he did that this game. And if he can continue to do that, I mean, he's a guy you could build around. But he's going to have to show it over more than a couple games for me.
Yeah, I'm still never going to buy into him not making decisions because I've seen it too many times now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, let's roll on. We got 7 games left. We're going to have to rapid fire a little bit here. There's a few bad ones in here. So let's go to a bad one. Tennessee at the Jets. I said even with the guys that Tennessee had out, if this game was close, they should be embarrassed. Well, they lost. Okay. Zach Wilson easily looks the best that he's looked. He made some clutch throws. He leads a field goal drive to win in overtime, but I mean, he missed some easy throws too. But overall, it's a positive performance. If you're a Jets fan, you can feel good about, he took a step there. And they sack Ryan Tannehill 7 times. The Titans in 4 games have allowed 6+ sacks 2 times already. So not a good sign for their offensive line. They're missing their top 2 receiving threats, but just a bad performance for Tennessee. And, the longer the Colts can be in contention for that division, the better for Eagles fans.
100%. That's a big takeaway. And I will say I'm not freaking out from a Titans perspective because they held out those receivers due to a safety precaution. And it just feels like they know they don't have to do much to win this division. So they're able to kind of take their foot off the pedal and make sure everyone's healthy, which I think is smart to be kind of – I'm sure they, kind of thought they were doing what Cleveland did against I believe it was the Jets or Houston it was actually, when they held Odell out. Yeah, when they held Odell out and they thought they were going to win, and then, you end up losing. I think honestly, if you watch the game, like it seemed as simple as that to me. It's the Jets knew they were running an absolute ton, and Derrick Henry was still able to make some things happen for sure. But you can only get so far in 2021 in the NFL when the other team knows you're going to run the ball. You look at the receivers they had out wide. They were using former Eagle Josh Reynolds, some other guys out there that have had cups of coffee elsewhere, and that's about it as their NFL tenure. And that's the Jets are going. They're still an NFL team, so if you throw out absolutely no one at the wide receiver position, they are going to be able to stop you. And they are, Titans defense is not a good defense. They are not, they're definitely below average, and that's disappointing for a head coach in Vrabel, who's obviously so focused on defense. And I have kind of praised Tennessee front office wise for allocating resources to the offense, because you hope your defensive head coach can, coach up the defense, but it doesn't seem like that's happened in Tennessee.
Yeah. So let's move on to Arizona at the Los Angeles Rams. Arizona gets their first win over the Rams in 4 years, and it was a dominant win. They're the only remaining undefeated team now. Their offense is averaging 35 points a game through 4 games, and they held the Rams offense, which averages 32 points a game, to 20. And so the defense played good. Matt Stafford showed some consistency issues that have plagued him his whole career. I mean, he's always had that game every once in a while. This is not like Ryan Fitzpatrick level, just boom or bust. Like, he's generally good, but he's always just had that game or two a year that's just not good. This was that game. And Arizona, they cruised to this one, and they're sitting atop a really loaded division that, any divisional win that they can get here early is going to be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the team I thought was going to come in last in the division, and now they're in the driver's seat after a huge win in LA, not just over LA. That game was on the road, so they get them coming to Arizona later on in the season. So that's a big deal. I still think the Rams are the best team in that division and the best team in the NFC. This isn't a game that scared me too much with the Rams. It just seemed like normal ebb and flow of an NFL football season. They had a big win against Tampa. You're not going to get up for every single game. So early divisional game in the year, I don't think they were treating it like an all-important, tiebreaker playoff divisional game. So I'm not freaking out about the Rams or the Cardinals yet necessarily. I believe the Cardinals play San Fran next week or this upcoming week.
Yeah,
so
I think that's right.
That's a big game for both those teams. That'll be a fun one. I'm interested to see who comes out there.
Yeah, so Seattle plays San Francisco. Seattle opened the game with 5 straight 3-and-outs. And then the offense rebounded. The defense had a strong performance all game. There's just no consistency with Seattle week to week in what you're going to get with them. But San Francisco loses the game, and now they sit 2 games back, and they're 0-1 in the division, and they haven't even faced either of the 2 best teams in the division. So San Francisco, not necessarily in a great place. Jimmy G also leaves the game with a calf injury. Trey Lance comes in. He looks shaky. He kind of settled in and made some plays, but it looks like Lance is probably going to get the start next week. And if so, he may never give it back.
I don't think he will. And he looked shaky, and there were definite rookie moments. I don't actually even really know what his stat line looked like. I don't know if you have that up. But
I'll pull it up while you talk.
But you could see the moment he came out there. I think he had a really, really rough first drive. After that, you could see the explosiveness in the offense really took off. I mean, Jimmy G was not getting a lot going in the first half against Seattle. There was not a lot to be excited about offensively for San Fran. So
he was 9 of 18 for 157 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, did he have anything on the ground?
7 carries for 41 yards.
Yep, and I think there were a couple first downs in there too that felt big at the time. So yeah, I was really impressed with Lance. You'll find I'm not exactly someone who's all, I don't place that much importance in completion percentage personally. So I thought that I was pretty impressed with Trey Lance. If you take that first drive out, I'd be curious to see what those stats look like. And I thought he really did settle in, like you said. And I think, I think it makes that game next week against Arizona that much more interesting.
Yeah, another potential game of the week. There's some real good games on slate for week 5.
For sure.
So Baltimore Ravens at the Denver Broncos. Lamar picks up a 300-yard passing game, only the second of his career, I think I saw, which I found hard to believe. But and the running game really struggled for them in this game. Obviously, they're on like running back number 7 or whatever, and they're on their third left tackle. So understandable. But Teddy Bridgewater gets knocked out of the game with a concussion. He gets replaced by Drew Lock. And, Baltimore rolls with this one.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar moves to 37-13 in his first 50 games. I mean, people can say whatever they want.
Quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. People can say whatever they want about the guy. All the guy does is win football games, and that's why this is my best bet of the week. Like, I was so confident in the Ravens. I went 3-0 at 1 o'clock, so I already had a 10-unit or whatever it was play on the Ravens. I ended up putting like 5 more units on it. This was my biggest play of the year, times 2, really. So I was really, really hyped to see, they just absolutely controlled the game. I never really was that nervous. I mean, they got up 17-7, ended up winning 23-7. They put it on cruise control. And then at the end of the game, the real drama and the fireworks is that Harbaugh runs the ball instead of kneeling down to keep his 100 yards rushing streak alive. And now they have a chance to break that next week on Monday Night Football.
Which I love that Fangio claims the higher ground. It's like, it's about player safety. It's like, dude, you were throwing passes into the end zone down 16 with 10 seconds left. Like,
that was
if you want the game to end. Fangio's the guy in a Madden league that like no huddles and calls timeouts to try to go score when they're losing by 30, but then they complain because you call a run play and break it for a touchdown. Just like, quit crying.
Yeah, no, that was a great comeback by Harbaugh. It was a great clapback by Harbaugh.
Okay, we got 3 games left here. Pittsburgh at Green Bay. Pittsburgh under 8.5 wins is also looking like a great futures bet for me here. But Big Ben becomes the only quarterback in 20 years to lose yardage on multiple 4th down passing attempts in the same season. Like, that's just a crazy statistic. And then the question is Aaron Rodgers going to be GM of the year? He says we got to go get Randall Cobb. They go get Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb has 4 third down conversions, 5 catches, 69 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And I'm telling you right now, if you don't think Aaron Rodgers is spiteful enough to only target Randall Cobb in the red zone, you're crazy. Randall Cobb's going to end this year with like 25 touchdowns, and he's only going to have like 500 yards because he's just going to feed him the ball inside the 5, and I am here for it.
No, it is pretty funny. He's definitely making a point with that. I didn't pay too close of attention to this game. Green Bay controlled it throughout. Green Bay starting to make that week 1 performance look more and more like an anomaly, and same with Pittsburgh the opposite way.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 teams going in opposite directions. So on to the Sunday night game, we had Tampa Bay at New England in a game that got way too much hype, in my opinion, the return, whatever. But Brady breaks Breeze's passing yard mark. And if you don't believe that the NFL intentionally guessed that this is the game that would happen and when they put it on the schedule, you're crazy. And I thought it was nice irony that in the same game that happened, Mac Jones completed 19 straight passes, tying Brady's franchise record. So it's like, yeah, you got the record, but we're gonna tie one of yours too. But the real storyline for this game with me is that secondary issues at Tampa are at panic levels right now. They signed Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman looked totally out of place. And I mean, I know he just walked in off the street. Maybe it's a scheme thing. Maybe he gets there, but he looked bad. Somebody mentioned Tampa as a potential like trade deadline destination for Darius Slay. And, I could see it. They desperately need help at cornerback as they've just been bitten by the injury bug.
Makes a ton of sense. I'm going to go in a different direction here. What is Belichick doing kicking that 56-yarder in a monsoon? I mean, that was crazy decision-making, and it's just another really good coach making really weird decisions on Sunday. And Mac Jones actually really impressed me in this game. He made all the throws that you wanted to see him make, and I had not been too impressed with him. I thought that they were too vanilla with him. I still think they were a little too vanilla with him in this game, but they were letting him do a little bit more, have a little bit more freedom in the offense. And I was impressed. And that's not, that's not saying much for me to be impressed by him, because I was not expecting much from Mac Jones when I tuned into this game, but he was pretty good.
Eagles Champ chiming in on YouTube says, "Go get Jaylen Smith." Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier. That Smith wasn't very good last year. He hasn't been good this year, but he's massively better than anybody in the Eagles linebacker room. So I'd go get him and hope he's not Orlando Scandrick 2.0. They got Sherman, stupid comment. I don't know if you watched the game. Sherman was absolutely horrible on Sunday. So not really a stupid comment, but carry on. You do you. Okay, last game, the Monday night game. The Las Vegas Raiders travel to Los Angeles and take over the Chargers Stadium, which, let's just say, that's got to be so annoying, right? You're Chargers, you're a playoff contender, and you know that every home game is just basically a road game. You're going to get booed. You're going to have to deal with crowd noise. I would hate that, but they come out on top anyways. Back-to-back wins over divisional opponents. For a Charger, their defense is looking really good. We saw what they did to the Chiefs. They really put the clamps on the Raiders as well. And the biggest thing that they've improved is better situational football. I mean, the first 2 weeks of the season, they were in the red zone so many times without points or without touchdowns, and they haven't been turning it over in the red zone. So on the Raiders side, they came back from 14 points down against Miami and Baltimore. They couldn't overcome a 21-0 start against LA. They've got to start games faster. They've got the firepower, but you don't have to dig the hole to get out of it. And so, the Raiders still looking strong, but if they could figure out how to start these games faster, it'd be helpful for them.
Raiders O-line felt like a problem early in this game. It's kind of been something that we've been watching for since the preseason. They did not have a good offseason in terms of their O-line and additions and subtractions, but it seemed like they were kind of skating by, and a lot of that was just Derek Carr being a really good player and making a lot of good plays. It didn't seem like they were able to skate by early in this game, and that's part of why they got down so big so early. I think there was a fumble in there, and that's always going to kill you and always going to get the Chargers off to a good start. And like you said, they did fight back in this game. They got it to 21-14 with the ball even at one point. So the Raiders are still a good team. This wasn't one of those games where I walked away thinking the loser stinks now. But the Chargers, I am just absolutely floored and impressed by that defense. And Brandon Staley seems to have had a really immediate impact on, how good that defense is.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that defense can continue to play at that level and we can see Herbert continue to take steps, the Chargers are for real. And
100%.
I mean, they've beat Kansas City once. They could potentially take that division. I'd still put the money on Kansas City, but the Chargers have an even shot, I would think.
Agreed.
All right. Well, that's going to about do it for our Week 4 review show. We'll be back later this week to get you ready for all the Week 5 action. But before we get out of here, Mark, you got any final thoughts for us tonight?
Yeah, I'll since I touched on it on Friday, I'll just do my official 1.0 2022 quarterback draft class in and out. I'm in on Malik Willis, and I'm in on Carson Strong. I'm out on Sam Howell, and I'm out on Spencer Rattler. The jury's still out on Matt Corral. I'm closer to out than in, though. That's my final thoughts.
Right.
I watched Carson Strong. He covered for me. I'm all in now. 6'4", huge dude from Nevada. I haven't talked much about him. Everyone out there, go watch some Carson Strong tape and get excited. Big arm, Josh Allen type, a little less mobility, but I'm all Carson Strong and Malik Willis stuff.
My final thought goes out to the Draft Network, who has the Eagles conditional pick from the Colts in as a second rounder right now. Come on, TDN. You are killing my mock draft vibes. After the Eagles get beat on a Sunday, I just want to go mock draft. And it does my soul pain to only have 2 top 10 picks instead of 3. So if you guys could fix that for me, I'd really appreciate it. Let's just go ahead and make that the one until Carson Wentz does not meet the conditions. And all Eagles fans, thank you for that.
I see people doing it on Twitter. That must be PFF.
PFF has it as a first, I think.
Okay.
But TDN had it as a second. At least when I check Sunday. Maybe it's fixed now. Fingers crossed. If so, I'll be posting a mock draft soon.
Doesn't have it as conditional. Madden just has it as a first unrestricted.
Yeah, I know. I'm the Eagles in my Madden league. I was a big fan of that, and our Colts user was not. Especially since he cut Carson Wentz before week 1 anyways.
That's hilarious.
All right. Well, that's going to about wrap it up here. Thank you for joining us for episode 14 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button wherever you're watching so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It would really help us out. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at _TPL. He's at Mark Henry Jr. _. From me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we'll see you guys next time.